In this video I build a magnetic knife bar that primarily suits my taste but is intended for friends. About a year ago I built a similar product that was very well received. Recently, friends of my parents expressed a desire for something similar and asked me if I could build it for them. The previous knife rail was glued together from small pieces of wood. This time I wanted to create something better. To achieve this, I turned to the Redwood Carpentry Workshop, which provided me with wood scraps. Among the pieces they gave me, I found one that was almost perfect for this project. I was very pleased to be able to use their scraps because I could be sure that the moisture content in the wood was perfect. Wood with poor moisture content swells or shrinks over time. This causes cracks to form or the wood to bend as a whole. The first step was to straighten all the edges and cut the piece to the desired thickness. This made me realize what it means to work with large, solid pieces of wood. This particular piece had so much internal tension that it kept getting stuck in the riving knife. I never had such problems with my previous projects because I always constructed large pieces by joining smaller pieces together. However, a single large piece undeniably has more appealing aesthetics than several smaller pieces glued together. Just before I embarked on this project, I asked the friends of my parents if they wanted to contribute to the design. I offered to incorporate a live edge on one or both sides. Unfortunately, they didn't respond in time, so I opted for a simple and minimalist design. I know that it is not good for sales to sell things that mainly appeal to me but not to others. But I'd rather build things that I like than things that I don't. So I decided to leave the edges straight and finished them with a beveled edge. Nowadays it's fashionable to make the bevel very large, but I don't like that, so we will not have large bevels. In the clip you can see what I mean with great tension in the wood. The wood has so much tension in it that it remains jammed on the riving knife after 3 cm of sawing. Each time I have to stop the saw and remove the piece, even though I only saw through half of the piece. As soon as I was all the way through, I moved the fence a few millimeters and sawed another straight edge, even though this was not necessary because I would plane the part in the next step. I actually like the planer because the result of the surface is very good. Unfortunately, in my next project, 2 chessboards, which I built at the same time, I planed through a nail and the surface finish is not so nice. Up to this point I left the length of the bar undefined in the hope that my parents' friends would react. Unfortunately, they didn't, and I was able to build according to my own opinion again. Most blade moldings are between 30 and 50 centimeters long. For me, the length itself is not so important. I think the ratio between thickness, height and width has to be right. In my case, that was about 40 centimeters. An important point with knife rails is how they are attached to the wall. Inlets are often milled into the left and the right for screws that are fixed into the wall. However, this milling takes away the space for the magnets at this point, which is why the outer centimeters of the knife rail often cannot be used to hold knives. I'm going to do the mounting in exactly the same way because it's very stable. Fortunately, I know how many knives should be attached to the holder. This is not entirely unimportant when deciding how long the molding should be, but with a length of 40 centimeters I have a good amount of 35 centimeters usable length, and this will be enough for 5 knives. Up to this point I first milled the beveled edge and then sanded it roughly. This step is important to create the basic shape and structure and to remove the rough unevenness. During the routing and rough sanding I make sure that the edges are finished evenly and precisely so that the end product has a solid foundation. The fine sanding on the other hand is always done at the very end of the machining process. The reason for that is that small scratches and unevenness can always occur during the various processing steps. If I were to do the fine sanding before those steps, there would be a high probability that these small blemishes would remain visible at the end. By fine sanding at the end, I ensure that the surface of the finished product is absolutely smooth and free of scratches. At the moment you can see how I am milling the inlets for the mountings. Here I make sure that the milled grooves are as parallel as possible so that the molding hangs straight later. The depth of the routing is not so important at this point, as the depth of the screw which is fastened in the wall can be adjusted. Of course, I still made sure that both milled holes were the same depth. The next step is to mill the inlets for the magnets. Extreme precision is required here, as it is crucial to achieve the correct depth. It is important to mill as deep as possible without breaking through to the other side of the material. This depth is crucial to ensure that the magnets are tight enough and can develop their full holding power. The thicker the surface, the stronger the knives will hold on the molding when the magnets are glued to the back. Therefore, it is important to find the right balance. The inlets must be deep enough to ensure a strong magnetic force, but the surface must remain thick enough to maintain structural integrity. A surface that is too thin could suffer from the stress of frequent use and moisture, which could lead to deformation or wear. During the milling process, I continuously check the depth and the condition of the surface to ensure it doesn't become too thin. I use special templates to ensure an even and precise milling depth. This process requires patience and a high degree of accuracy, as even small deviations can affect the functionality and durability of the molding. Once I had reached the right depth, I reworked with the chisel. This step is crucial to eliminate the milling marks and give the magnets even more space. By reworking with the chisel, I can ensure that the inlets for the magnets are absolutely clean and precise. The chisel allows me to make fine adjustments that would not be possible with the router alone. I make sure that all unevenness is removed and that the edges of the inlets are smooth and even. I thought long and hard about how I should design the back. The simplest solution would of course be to leave everything open. But even though nobody will normally see the back, the thought of my parents' friends have a knife rack with the side facing the wall that isn't nicely finished bothers me. It's important to me that every side of the product, whether visible or not, is neat and attractive. So I decided to make a kind of paneling. This paneling will not only cover the back and give it a clean professional look, but also will have a practical use. It will be designed so that it can be unscrewed if necessary to allow access to the magnets. This is particularly important if the magnets need to be replaced or adjusted over time. I cut a 5mm thick strip of oak that fits perfectly into this recess. At this point I realize that I haven't said anything about the type of wood I'm using. Basically, of course, it doesn't matter which wood is used, as every wood has similar properties. My parents' friends have a lot of oak elements in their house, which is why the oak knife molding is a good choice. But that's not the only reason why oak is well suited for this job. Oak is generally used for cutting boards because it has a high tannic acid content. This has an antibacterial effect and also gives the wood the ability to resist discoloration. This is of course important for cutting boards. I don't know how important this is for a knife molding, but having the good properties will definitely be not a fault. Light colored types of wood such as maple or birch are particularly unsuitable because they are likely to take on colors. But again, I don't know how important this is for knife rails, as they are only intended to hold clean knives and are not used for cutting meat. Because this is a piece that occasionally comes into contact with moisture, I would like to talk briefly about how I prepare it for oiling. In general, I oil my wood and don't varnish it because I want to keep the tactile surface. When oiling, it is possible that the wood fibers from sawing will stand up and make our surface look rough. These raised fibers allow moisture to penetrate the wood better. To counteract this, I sand the piece once to the highest grit number. In my case, this is 380. And after sanding, I spray the entire knife mold with water to artificially create the effect of the fibers standing up. After the wood has dried on its own, you can clearly see and feel the surface is rougher than before. To get it smooth again, I go down 2 grit levels and send it back up to 380 grit. Then I can make sure that the oiling doesn't leave a rough surface. I kept both sides of the small strip like this because it makes a considerable difference how finely the sides are ground on thin pieces. Rough surfaces can absorb or release moisture better, which can lead to more circulation. Depending on how damp the environment is, this can cause the wood to bend to one side or the other. If both sides are treated equally, only the same amount of moisture can be absorbed or released, and the piece remains straight. It may still change in width, but at least it will not rub. On the thicker piece, I don't sand the inside so high, as it will be sealed with glue anyway. Of course, the type of oil is also important for durability. Food-safe oil should always be used for products that come into contact with silverware. I use hard wax oil. This has the advantage that there is a protective layer of wax on the wood, which protects the wood from scratches. Of course, this layer wears off over time, but it can also be reapplied very quickly and easily. It is not necessary to sand down the entire oil, as it is the case with other types of oil. With this oil, you can simply apply a new layer and the surface is as good as new. But in fact, this is not necessary. I said that this knife strip was intended for my parents' friends, but they live so far away that I can't just drive there to renew the oil. The oil I use is also considered to be one of the most durable. That's why I am assuming that this knife edge will look good for years. In the clip you see here, I am in the process of finishing the bar. Now I just need to add the holder and the magnets. I bought key rings, at least they are called in Germany in this way, for the holder, which fit perfectly into the milled holes. As the screws used to attach the hangers are smaller than the holes, it is possible to move the height of the hangers by 2 mm to counteract crooked holes in the wall. It is also possible to screw the hangers in the other way around if you like the grain better the other way. I know this is a rather simple and boring project. If you are interested in something out of the ordinary and haven't seen my last two projects, I would be really happy for you to check out my self-made guitar or a self-made lamp whose design is completely AI generated. Both of those videos are longer than this one, but also show a more extensive process. And if you are interested in seeing those two chessboards I'm building in parallel, subscribe to my channel so you don't miss out. I am now in the process of inserting the magnets into the blade strip. I have particularly strong neodymium magnets, each of which should have a holding force of 8 kilograms. Unfortunately, I haven't quite been able to measure those 8 kilograms, so to be on the safe side, I'm going to glue two of them next to each other. I'm not using a normal hot glue gun for the glue. The sticks I use here are particularly good at sticking to wood and are resistant to moisture, so they will sit firmly in there. Once everything has cured and the cover has been screwed on, the blade strip is finished. Because the knife bar is not for me, I had to take the pictures for the product on the right thread and hold them with a finger here.